Okay, at this point, I am just going to briefly narrate a PowerPoint, which is loaded up into Canvas. When I make PowerPoints, my habit is to put any notes about images, the source of the images, or other things that I want to say about what's on the slide into the notes pages. So you can always download the PowerPoint and see the content of the notes pages. In this case, there's not a lot in the notes pages. So what I'm going to do is just switch to those images in this movie that I'm making and talk about each slide for as long as I feel I need to, save it as a movie, and make it available to you in Canvas. Okay, the first slide I want to talk about, as the title slide says, Semiotics, the study of signs and symbols. And if you look at that, you can see that there are several different Winter Olympic sports being indicated. The fact that we can look at the images and determine that the first one is something involving skiing and shooting, and the next one has several people in a sled, and then we have downhill skiing, then we have curling, cross-country skiing. The fact that we can identify what these are, if we know enough about winter sports, indicates that these are icons. We don't have to be taught their meaning. We can just deduce their meaning from what is depicted. The next slide shows semaphore flags, and I put that in there because the word semiotics and the word semaphore are both from the same Greek word, sema, for sign. Semaphore would be a system whereby you have different flags and different positions, and you can then spell out things using all the letters of the alphabet. The next one has two of the founding giants of semiotics. We've got Charles Sanders Peirce, it looks like Pierce, but he pronounced it Peirce on the one side, and Ferdinand de Saussure. And those are the two men whose work I will be talking about over the next few minutes. So semiotics is related to linguistics, and linguistics is the scientific study of language. Before there was linguistics, there was something called philology, and philology was the study of languages as it appeared in written texts, in books. But it turns out that's not the natural way languages are. That is a radically artificial representation of language. So it wasn't until the 19th century that they figured out that if they wanted to understand language and how it works, they shouldn't be looking at written text, they should be looking at people speaking. So in the early 20th century, Swiss linguist Ferdinand de Saussure identified spoken language as the appropriate object of study. And there are numerous branches of linguistics, and three of them comprise semiotics. So the next slide has the pictures of all the different branches, but the three with the asterisks, semantics, pragmatics, and syntactics, are the ones that are the three parts of semiotics. They're defined as follows. Semantics, the branch of linguistics and logic concerned with meaning. So when I use a word, say the word bear, okay, it turns out until you have some more context, you don't know if I mean naked, or if I mean the furry animal, or if I mean carrying a burden, okay? Pragmatics is the branch of linguistics dealing with languages in use and the context in which it is used. So, once again, language is something that has meaning because of agreements between people about what are the definitions of the words, and how it is used will determine what a given message means in terms of the audience. Syntactics is the arrangements of words and phrases to create well-formed sentences in a language. So if I say, green car, file cabinet, corkboard, that is not a meaningful utterance to you. But if I say, put the file cabinet and the corkboard in my green car, suddenly it is meaningful. So different languages have different rules for arranging them. Languages that are what are called, that are heavily, inflected. You can move words around in one language, put them in different places, and still understand what it means, because the word endings will tell you that this was the subject and that was the object. English it does not have much inflection left in it, so word order is especially important in English. So the next is a picture of Ferdinand de Saussure, and he lived from 1857 to 1913. And he had the dyadic model of signs. And what that means is that he figured a sign had two sides to it. The linguistic sign is composed of the signifier, for example, the sound of the word dog, okay, and the signified, the thing that it's signifying, which is the four-legged animal of the genus Canis. Well, for Saussure, both the signifier and the signified were purely psychological. Subsequent interpretations have become more materialistic, focusing on the physical sound and the actual dog. So one of Saussure's great contributions is he talks about the arbitrariness of the sign. So we have a quote here. Saussure posited that linguistic form is arbitrary, and therefore that all languages function in a similar fashion. According to Saussure, language is arbitrary because there is no objective relationship between the sign, for example, the letters that make up the word cat, and the thing it refers to, the actual cat. Meaning emerges from the word cat not because of any objective link between these letters and the animal they are indicating. Rather, meaning emerges from the word cat by comparing it and contrasting it to other words such as car and mat. This is what Saussure means by the argument that language is self-referential. So the word dog means dog because it's different from bog, and it's different from cog, and it's different from log. So the difference between dog and log is what makes the one refer to the four-legged animal and the other one refer to a big chunk of wood. The other linguist here is Charles Sanders Peirce, pretty much contemporaneous with Saussure. He is an American. He is what's called a polymath, meaning he knew all kinds of stuff in all manners of different disciplines. And so he, instead of having a dyadic notion, there's two parts of the sign, he's got three parts of the sign. He's got the sign, he's got the sign's subject matter, so in this case it would be an actual physical dog as opposed to the word dog, and then the sign's meaning, its interpretant. So his third part is that making of meaning by some sort of observer. And so one of the things he says is, nothing is a sign unless it is interpreted as a sign, okay? So Peirce's three types or modes of signs are the symbol, the symbolic. The signifier does not resemble the signified, but is fundamentally arbitrary. The icon, the iconic, the signifier resembles or imitates the signified. So the first slide in this PowerPoint that showed the different images for different kinds of winter sports, the fact that you can look at them and tell the difference between downhill skiing and ski jumping. There's this resemblance there. And then the indexical, the signifier is not arbitrary, but is directly connected in some way to the signified. And we're going to have some examples of that in a minute. So here we've got a symbol. So that is the symbol now. It's the on-off symbol for a computer and a variety of different electronic devices. There's nothing in there that says on or off. And if you were to look at it, you could say, you know what it looks like to me? It looks like a wheel of like a gurney or a wheelchair or something. I see the axle and I see the wheel. Well, that's not what it means. It means on and off, and that's utterly arbitrary. So until you learned that that was the on-off button, you had no way of knowing that that was the on-off button. Now here we have another collection of icons, and so we've got something, a shoe with cleats in it, we've got a bicycle, we've got a sailboat, we have multiple oars, so that's a rowing event where there are multiple participants. We have a single paddle for kayaking. We've got swimming, we've got targeting, we've got lifting weights and horses and gymnastics and volleyball and basketball and field hockey and soccer and water polo and boxing and I couldn't tell you, wrestling, fencing, and then one that's on multiple events, that's probably the pentathlon, and then it looks like maybe the Olympic Village. So the fact that I can know what those mean without having been taught what they mean is an indication that they are icons. They resemble what they are representing. And then finally, we've got the index or the indexical. So you've got a thermometer there, and it shows both Fahrenheit and centigrade or Celsius. So if you look on the left-hand side, you see the 0 Celsius. That's freezing. Well, over on the right-hand side, that's about where 32 is. So 32 degrees Fahrenheit equals 0 degrees Celsius equals freezing, And then up at the top, you've got 120. That's the boiling point of water in Fahrenheit, and that is 50 degrees Celsius. Well, that doesn't seem quite right because I thought 100 degrees Celsius was the boiling point of water. So there might be something a little bit off here. But in any event, the idea that as the temperature changes, that column of mercury goes up. Oh yeah, I see what it is now. It's 212 is the boiling point of water. Okay, so it is correct. And so as the temperature increases, the column of mercury rises, and it's an actual index. So it has real meaning. It's not arbitrary. The jumps between the numbers are not arbitrary. They are, consistent jumps. So that is an example of an index. So that wraps up our brief introduction to semiotics. We'll come back to it once or twice again briefly, but this relates to the idea that some people thought visual versus verbal was not an especially relevant route for our study of visual communication. But it turns out the field of semiotics, or the study of signs and symbols, is kind of relevant. So that's why we're going to start off here, and eventually we're going to come back to it when we're looking at a particular piece of analysis of a piece of advertising by a person who is something of a linguist and a semiotician.